For Sunday, March 13th, you have found the Georgia Gang. Topping our agenda today, presidential politics, some bills in the Georgia legislature, and we're going to talk about some candidate qualifying. These and other topics on the Georgia Gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
I'm glad you can be with us. I'm Phil Kent, sitting in for Dick Williams, and I want to greet a new first-time guest panelist, Jennifer Hazelton. Welcome to the gang.
Hey, Phil.
Jennifer is a former CNN producer and also ran the newsroom for Fox News in D.C. and now is back in Atlanta. And of course, we have one of our favorites, Theron Johnson. I'm glad you're back on the set today, and our regular Jeff Dickerson. What we're going to do is what we do best, analyze the hot presidential race. We did that last week, and there's a lot more to talk about. As all of you know, we had the debate last Tuesday. I'm going to go right down the table, starting with Theron, but I think we ought to talk about Michigan. That's very interesting, where Bernie Sanders upended Hillary Clinton, and of course, where Donald Trump emerged the winner. And then, of course, we had the debate later in the week. So, Theron, why don't you kick it off with your analysis?
Well, listen, it was a big win for Bernie Sanders by winning Michigan, but one of the things that we've got to point out is that it was still a net gain for the Hillary Clinton campaign. There were two other states on that day that she won. But at a time where she's, leading by 20 points in Florida, 30-something points in I think, Ohio, and also she's leading by 30 points in Illinois. These are states that are coming up next week. I think it pretty much seals the deal for the nomination. I think the lesson learned for the campaign is that you can't take any state for granted. And I think that the Bernie Sanders campaign feels a boost in their enthusiasm about winning that state. But ultimately, I think you're not going to see the Clinton campaign not campaigning in these upcoming states. And ultimately, I still predict that she'll be the Democratic nominee.
Jeff?
Well, Michigan was interesting for Bernie Sanders, and he should be congratulated on that win. He did really well in that debate prior to, right up before the election, and I think that he appealed to a lot of voters who were concerned about the crisis in Flint and the schools in Detroit and many of the other issues that are going on. Michigan still has a very high unemployment rate, and so he's going to get a lot of that vote. He did well, and it's great. I think that Theron's right. It's it's a boost to his campaign, and it encourages him to go forward. But what does it really mean in the long run? Not much.
Jennifer?
Well, I think it means not much because of the way the Democrats have their system structured with super delegates. I think what might be interesting to watch on the Democratic side is if Sanders continues to win states but doesn't accrue delegates, is there going to be a level of dissatisfaction with Bernie supporters at the way the party has structured their nominating process? Are they going to feel like the fix has been in for Hillary Clinton in the beginning? On the Republican side, I think you can't deny that it was a huge victory for Donald Trump, winning Mississippi, winning Michigan, winning Hawaii. Certainly the Trump momentum continues. Ted Cruz did pick up a state, but of course less delegate count than what Mr. Trump picked up. We had a debate Thursday night where all of the candidates did well. I don't think it changes the dynamic, so I think Trump still has the momentum rolling into Tuesday.
Okay, well, let's go down the table again. Let's talk a little bit more about the outsider status of Trump, as you're pointing out, winning, and then Bernie Sanders. A lot of the pollsters got that wrong with regard to Michigan. And it's interesting, both on the left and the right, the electorate seems to really be turning against free trade because it's not fair trade. And Sanders and Trump are basically saying the same thing to American workers who feel that jobs have gone overseas, and in my opinion, rightly so, and how their wages have been depressed. Theron, what do you think about that factor?
Well, the thing that the Sanders campaign did a very good job in Michigan is he got hammered very early on for not voting for the bailout of the automobile industry in Michigan. And that was something that was very popular that the president did with Congress. And so, but I think the unique thing that he did is that he made it less about the actual auto bailout deal and more about the workers. And I think what you saw is he really appealed to the workers there in Michigan. And so they felt like he had a message. As far as trade, listen, Hillary Clinton did it the other night when she was in the debate. She's talked about her votes on trade deals, and so she's got to continue to talk about that. But
she's against the Trans-Pacific Pact.
But I want to respond to something earlier. What you're not going to see on the Democratic side and what we're seeing on the Republican side with this whole notion of having a broker convention is we're going to be unified. And hopefully I think that person will be Hillary Clinton. So we're not going to get to a point where we're attacking people's ears and the size of their hands and basically turn off Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton voters. We're going to unite to basically be able to beat the Republicans.
Jeff, do you think the Democrat Party will be united even if Hillary Clinton continues under the shadow of an FBI investigation?
Oh, I think that it already is very united. I mean, you know, and that's just one of those Republican talking points to, you know, come up with a FBI investigation. I think that if you look at these debates, I mean, they're very civil. They focus on the issues. They're not, you know, attacking the person as you see on the Republican side.
How about Bernie
They're
Sanders
very
supporters?
different.
How about, Jeff, Bernie Sanders supporters chanting Hillary's a liar?
Well, you know, there are a few folks out there who are chanting those kinds of things. Look, he appeals to people who are younger and, you know, a lot of first-time voters, a lot of millennials and things of that sort. Considering his age, I don't quite get that, but there are a lot of people who appeal to, who, you know, that Bernie Sanders appeals to. I think that in the main, when you look at Democrats, they are going to unite solidly behind Hillary Clinton when she's nominated. The question is, will Republicans do the same behind Trump?
Well, Jennifer, can you answer that question?
Well, I think the jury is still out on that a little bit. Trump did make strides this week in the debate to try to be a calmer, more presidential figure, trying to ask for unification. And you and I have talked about this. I read his book, The Art of the Deal, years ago, and he talks about in that book, when you're negotiating, you start with bellicose rhetoric and braggadocio, and you gradually move yourself towards the handshake with the other person across the table. And if all of that is still true, if he's still operating under that premise, we're seeing him sort of execute how he executes deals as he laid out in The Art of the Deal. I do want to get to what you talked about on trade, though, because I really think that is kind of the heart of the issue of what we're seeing right now, both on the Bernie Sanders side and on the Donald Trump side. We're seeing about nearly three decades of Americans, working class Americans, feeling the effects of NAFTA, feeling the effects of China having most favored nation trading status. Both of those things had roots in the Clinton administration. We've seen a decline in wages and a decline in jobs. The American people are feeling it. That's what they're responding to, and that's why I think we're seeing what we are with Trump and with Mr. Sanders.
Well, just very quickly, too, we've got a big day coming up, as you know, winner take all in Florida in the GOP primary, and our Fox 5 analyst Matt Towery is down there polling with his son for Opinion Savvy. Here's what he found the other day. He did this poll. Granted, it was before the Thursday debate, but he found Donald Trump with a whopping 43%, saying he is getting all levels around the state in the GOP primary. Rubio struggling, the senator there, 24%, Cruz 21%, and John Kasich at 10%. So, Jeff, you're chuckling. What does this mean for the Republicans?
You know, it's a good poll, and I'm glad to see that Matt did that poll. I think that those numbers are narrowing considerably for Donald Trump. I think they're now down in the 30s and the high 30s. He's still ahead of Rubio in Rubio's home state. And that's a problem for Rubio. And if he loses his state, he's going to be in trouble, not just in terms of trying to win the Republican nomination, but trying to retain his Senate seat and his credibility in his home state. And he's got to make a decision.
You got to agree with that.
You hit the nail on the head. I mean, I couldn't agree more. The polls do show some narrowing. The debate performance on Thursday night will probably narrow the polls a bit more. People might reconsider Rubio after he kind of got back on track with his original campaign demeanor and his original campaign message. I don't know that it's going to be enough. I still think Trump takes Florida. There is speculation that Rubio, if there's not a good poll for him before we get to Tuesday, that he might bail out to save some dignity and preserve a future career. Rubio's campaign insists that's not happening. We'll just have to see how it plays out.
Real quick, you got the last word.
There's no way that the American people, and especially people in Florida, could have watched that debate on Thursday. And this is what they heard. They heard Rubio, Cruz, and Kasich and Trump offer no solution around climate change. Basically, Rubio even said that there's no climate change. And they basically continuing to try to weaken the Social Security system. They even want to privatize it, and they want to weaken the laws around protecting workers. And so we can spin it all we want to. The Trump momentum is going, and it's going to flow through Florida. And I predict that Rubio is going to have to really strongly consider dropping out after he loses Florida.
Well, I agree too, and I think John Kasich has a decision to make because Ohio was there too.
Correct.
However, we're going to switch over to the Georgia legislature and some bills, so stay with us for the next segment.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
Welcome back to the Georgia Gang. I'm Phil Kent, sitting in for Dick Williams, and we're right in the midst of a lot of legislative flurry under the Gold Dome in Atlanta at the Capitol, and we're just going to touch on some of the bills today. As you know, some of them are in flux. We've got till March 24th, which is the end of the session. However, as we taped on Friday, the Georgia Senate was poised to pass the right to concealed carry for students. And Theron, we're going to go down the table, but let me start with you first. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, as we tape, this vote is probably happening right now. And so I think that there was a robust, very high-spirited debate in the Senate about this bill. There are some Republicans and, of course, Democrats that oppose this bill. And the thing that is so striking to me about this is that you have 80% of Georgians who said that they don't support this bill. And you also have the university system and the university regents who've come out adamantly opposed to this bill. So if the students don't want the bill, if the parents doesn't want the bill, and if the schools don't approve the bill, then what are these legislators really doing it for? And I think this is nothing but election year politics to basically be able to go back to their Republican districts and say that we basically passed a crazy bill that is going to allow 21, 22-year-old students to carry guns on campuses. Well, and at a time, Phil, when we've had mass murders on college campuses all across this country. This is insane, and people should be outraged.
Well, what a lot of people, and especially in outside of urban areas, don't understand is the rising crime on campuses, and you can look no further than Georgia
But the
State.
police officers, that's why we have police officers on the campus.
They're not there everywhere.
Instead of these state legislators passing a bill, they should pass money and put money in the governor's budget to have better paid, more trained police officers on our college campuses.
That's a nice speech. Jeff, let me turn to you.
Do you really want to
turn to you? I do want to turn to you because you made a point that you can't keep them concealed in the dormitories. Jeff, what you're forgetting, and I want you to comment on this, is that a lot of these are 21-year-olds with a license to concealed carry. They're traveling from around. They have to take MARTA, which you like. They have to walk through some bad neighborhoods. I don't see anything wrong with them having, and you're a gun owner. They need to protect themselves, especially women in crime-ridden areas.
Theron rightfully asked, why is this going forward when you got 80% all reasonable people who are opposed to it? And the reason is because they want to pander politically. They want to pander politically. They do it every year. Every single year there's another guns everywhere bill. And I just want to predict what the next one is. And so on Friday morning, there was a story on the front page of the AJC that said that kindergartners are getting suspended in huge numbers. And so maybe next year, the Republicans in the Georgia General Assembly will arm them so that they can protect themselves against some of these unruly kindergartners.
Well,
there's no end to the idiocy here.
Thank you for that idiotic analysis, but let me turn to Jennifer here. What do you think?
Let's not go crazy. Let's not.
No, let's get it going.
Let's not go crazy. Okay, so Phil may be a little disappointed to hear that. I actually can see both sides on this one. However, this bill does not allow students to bring weapons into sporting events. It does not allow students to bring weapons into dormitories. It does not allow students to bring weapons into Greek houses. You have to be a licensed gun owner over 21 years of age, which is the state law. I think when in doubt, you err on constitutional
but Jennifer,
rights.
Here's the thing, Jennifer. Let me ask you a question. So you mean to tell me that you're okay with allowing a student to carry a gun on campus? And you got to think, when you were 21 and 22 years old, and which is not long ago,
I was perfect at 21.
You were at that age finding loopholes and ways to get around rules and regulations. You don't think that if we allow students, young people who are there to get a quality education, carry a gun on campus, they're not going to find a way to get it into a sporting event or a Greek house or a dormitory? Is that really logical?
I think when you're talking about licensed gun owners, not just anybody buying a gun off the street, which they shouldn't have the gun in the first place, right? We're talking about licensed gun owners. There's a difference. So I think that your concern is greatly diminished. And I would also say that as a former female on a college campus, the idea of being able to protect myself does provide a level of comfort.
Do you know how easy it is to get to be a licensed gun owner in Georgia?
Yeah.
I mean, you fill out an application.
And you know
you
what?
go and you get your
those people are
fingerprint.
very rare
And,
to be involved in it. You're stereotyping all of these students as wild
I'm not
and irresponsible.
stereotyping, but actually,
That's
Jennifer
terrible.
just made my point. I'm so glad Jeff brought that up. That's why the Republican Congress needs to support President Obama for tougher gun laws and gun control in this country, because you make it's so easy to get here. But again, no one can answer the question about how are you going to stop a student.
Well, let me shift to another topic, because you guys are always going to be for gun control. Let me shift and stay on a campus issue, though. Right. We talked about the Georgia Board of Regents. There was some good news this past week with regard to due process when students are accused of harassment, for example. This has been going on for a while, and they're trying to up the standard of proof, because we've seen on campuses, particularly Georgia Tech, where people have been unfairly accused of things and there's not due process. So let me start with you, Jennifer. I know you've followed this Georgia Tech thing, and it's system-wide. What's your analysis of this?
Well, I think due process is always a good idea. I think both sides have a right to be heard. The fact that Representative Earhart was able to make some progress in moving the university system towards due process for all students is a positive, but there are some questions that remain in terms of what's in place now. For example, you know, the accused are now allowed to be able to supply witnesses and evidence to the hearing panel, but there's no requirement that that information get included in the final report. There is the option for the accused to write a written response to the hearing panel, but there's no directive on whether any action needs to be taken on that response. So while I think it's a really great step in the right direction, it looks like it could be nailed down a bit more.
Any comments, guys?
You know, I'm going to tell you, if I'm a college president at Georgia State or Georgia Tech or whatever, my number one priority is going to be to protect students on campus, most particularly vulnerable female students. And if it appears to me, as president of that university, that they are being harmed or in harm's way in any way, shape, or form, I am going to take immediate action. I'm not going to wait for a judge to decide a year and a half from now whether or not that student should be in school. And I don't understand a lot of this yes, we all deserve due process. That's the nature of our society. But when you're talking about a college, when you're talking about protecting female students on a college campus from predatory, drunken males, young kids who don't know any better, I think that the hammer should come down on them hard and fast.
But he doesn't want us to have guns.
No, he doesn't want us to have guns. All right, you got the last word, Jennifer.
I don't want him shooting the girls.
When we come back, when we come back, we're going to be talking about some English legislation that might be dead or it might be hanging by a thread. I want to hear what Theron has to say about this, so stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
Welcome back to the Georgia Gang. I'm Phil Kent, sitting in for Dick Williams. And Theron, there was some activity last week with regard to a constitutional amendment to make English the official language of government. And of course, there were some common sense exceptions for commerce and in the court system and all of that kind of stuff. But it's very interesting, and I know we all follow this, but it was a subcommittee that was pretty evenly divided between Democrats and Republicans. Right. And we've seen this happen sometimes. When it was defeated in this subcommittee, there weren't enough Republicans present to push it through.
To have any more halts.
And so that's exactly right. And so I have to blame the chairman, but my hero is Representative Barry Fleming, because he's for it. And if he can round those votes up, it's a very thin thread here that this legislation's hanging on, but if he can round the votes up, it could be up for reconsideration.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Phil. This bill fell in the Caldwell subcommittee within the Judiciary Committee, and you're right, it's 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans on that committee. The thing about this bill that was very sort of saddening and disheartening, I think, is that at an attempt to sort of make English the primary language, we live in a state where 15% of Georgians actually speak another language other than English. And so, again, this was a bill that had very discriminatory language in it against Hispanic and minority voters in this state.
To be a citizen, you have to know English.
No, but
did
again,
you not know that?
I know that, and I speak English very well. Good, Phil, and I'm able to debate you very well with my English education.
You're not doing too good on this one. It's a public safety issue too.
This
is also a public safety issue. Do you want to issue driver's licenses in 12 languages?
This is just another issue that you are promoting to try to discriminate against people who,
Oh, that's ridiculous.
particularly minority.
I want to
people of color.
Americanize everyone.
No,
In English,
Americanize
English
everybody.
is
Let me
the
tell
tie
you what
that
it
binds.
is. There's a common thread here, right? Whether it is religious freedom,
Right.
which is guaranteed under the First Amendment, whether it's gun rights, which is guaranteed under the Second Amendment, or whether it's English only. And we already have a statute in Georgia that makes it the official language, along with 32 other states, right?
That's correct.
But no, these guys have got to figure out something new to do.
We
right?
wanna
And so they
close
want
the
to
loopholes.
embed it in the state constitution. Here's what I would suggest that legislators in Georgia do. Create jobs. Look at our tax code.
Oh, gee, we never thought of that. Thank you.
Let's
for that.
do some
Yeah.
things that are substantive. Why are we talking about English in the Constitution? Why are we talking about religious freedoms that we already have? Why are we talking about gun rights that we already have? Let's do
Okay,
something substantive.
end of the sermon. Let's move
My
on to
God,
some other
it's
things.
crazy.
Let's
But
talk about.
You have to admit that there is a common thread here with all of these things. They're pushing the envelope on rights we
Are you
already
through? Are you
have.
through with the sermon? We do have to get on to other topics, Jeff.
You
Thanks
brought
for
it up, Phil.
thanks for the filibuster.
You did bring it up.
All right, let's talk about one of the big candidate qualifications that occurred this last week, and that was Johnny Isakson and some unknown Democrat. Jeff, who is this Democrat? Keep it short.
Well, you know, I can't really tell you who any of the candidates are against Johnny Isakson. One has run previously, you know, but we don't have any really strong candidates against Johnny. I wouldn't expect for anybody to really come out strong against Johnny. He is very popular. Obviously, among Republicans, I know that there is some discontent that he's not conservative enough on the Republican side. But he's strong among Republicans in Georgia. He's strong among Democrats in Georgia. And I don't think you're going to see.
Well, there's a candidate, Jennifer, named
Yeah.
Jim Barksdale. He's behind the party.
Yeah,
and
we have, on the Democratic side, we have 4 people, as we tape it, that have
Right.
qualified to run for the Democratic nomination. Then ultimately, that person will go on to run against Johnny Isakson. One thing that I'm happy for is
Well,
that
tell us about this Barksdale. This
I don't know.
He's a self-funded millionaire.
Well, listen, you know, well, you guys elected a self-funded millionaire and who beat a long, outstanding.
Well, that's
congressman.
true. I mean, I'm
but
not saying
think-
that in a negative way.
No, I think the key here is that Mr. Barksdale is a guy who I think has been eyeing this race for some time. He said that publicly, and now we've had 3 other people qualify. So I think we got to wait and see. But I hope the party will unite behind the nominee and put up a good challenge.
Okay, real quick. This was an interesting one in a GOP primary in the 9th Congressional District
Yep.
held by Doug Collins.
Doug Collins, Paul Brown.
Paul Brown, tell us about that one.
Paul Brown, former U.S. Congressman from the Athens area, has qualified to run in the 9th Congressional District currently held by Doug Collins. Brown is a tried and true conservative. Collins is conservative as well, but there have been some folks in that district who have been unhappy with some votes that he has taken that looked in line with the establishment in Washington, like the omnibus bill from 2015. I think it's going to be tight. Collins is already trying to paint Brown as a political career politician desperate to stay in power, and Brown is going to try to ride the Trump populist wave. So we'll see how it goes.
Okay, thanks for that analysis. All right, when we come back, it's time for winners and losers. Stay with us.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
I'm Phil Kent, sitting in for Dick Williams, so welcome back to Winners and Losers. Jennifer, go ahead.
All right, my loser is kind of on a personal level. The Roswell Police Department for running speed traps on 120 at the bottom of a very steep hill.
Did you get one?
I'm not going to admit to anything, but I will just say that
Did they serve you a
was,
ticket in English or in Spanish?
if it were in Spanish, I might have been able to get rid of it. But I'm even more hacked off by the sergeant over the motorcycle unit, who, when I went to complain about them trying to trap motorists on a steep hill, told me, "Oh, well, we call that spot the honey hole." So that was great. So
Right.
they're my losers. My 2 winners. My first winner is the American public, who actually got to watch a very substantive debate on the Republican side on Thursday night. I think that was something that the party definitely wanted to see. And then my other winner is Nancy Reagan, laid to rest on Friday, a fine first lady, a true patriot, a loving wife, and she'll be missed.
Okay, Jeffrey.
Mayor Reed, I think, is a huge winner. We've got a lot going on here. Well, first of all, I mean, you know, his support for Hillary Clinton, and we haven't talked enough about that here, I think is deserving of at least a cabinet post. I think commerce would be perfect for Kasim Reed, especially if you consider what he's done in the city of Atlanta. And all you have to do is look at the bond rating to see what that is. I mean, we've had our 9th bond rating here. Also, Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, another $6 billion expansion to keep us right on the top of our game at Hartsfield.
We got to talk fast
Yeah,
there.
really quickly, and definitely want to make Mayor Reed a winner as well. But also Uber and Lyft coming to the airport, they are able to drop off, but hopefully they will get able to pick up. Also, Lee May gave a great State of the County address. But also my loser is going to be this gentleman, Mike Griffin, who's a lobbyist for the Georgia Baptist Mission Board. He basically tried to conjure up support amongst the religious right to basically get them to get more involved in the RIFA bill.
Okay.
And basically he quoted and basically referenced Hitler. Bad move on his
And
part.
I'm going to make also Uber and Lyft my winners for getting to the airport. Well, thanks again for watching the Georgia Gang, and stay with us and watch us next week.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.